Greetings and salutations, folks, and welcome once again, as always, to another helping of Mr H's Hot Pot. You join me today out in my hometown on a bit of a bimble. More specifically, I'm currently in Wigan Cemetery, which you can just see behind me, which is rather fitting, as tonight will be All Hallows Eve, or as it's more commonly known, Halloween night. Now, hopefully, I'll be able to get this video uploaded, ready for your edification, later on this evening, just in time for Halloween. However, if unfortunately I can't, and I have to upload it the day after or whatever, apologies in advance. Now, the reason I'm sticking local today on a bit of a bimble, Hot Potters, is I'm currently jalopyless. And the little jalopy that Mrs H uses to tootle to and from work, leaving me with the big jalopy that I'm normally sitting in when I'm making videos, she's having to use that to go to work. And I'm left with Shank's pony, which for those of you who don't know what Shank's pony is, it's your own two legs. Now, the car failed on its MOT on welding. It needs a bit of welding doing on a number of areas. Unfortunately for me, one of the areas that the examiner identified when I've taken it to a welder, he said it doesn't really need doing, and you're going to have a lot of trouble getting someone to weld there. So I'm going to have to do a bit of bobbing and weaving and ducking and diving to get that taken off the old MOT failure. That, however, is fodder for another video. Today's little video is just going to be a bit of a fun video because, as I say, I'm having to stick local. I'm stuck on Shank's pony. So, without further ado, let's jump into today's little story, shall we? Now, way back when, in the 1980s, when Mr H was a little nipper, it was a rite of passage on Halloween night to come into this cemetery after dark. By this point in the year, the clocks have gone back, so after school, it's going dark pretty quick. So you'd have your tea and you'd get out on Halloween night, and to show how brave you was, you'd come down here in groups and you'd walk through the cemetery after dark. Although there's a wall around this cemetery, there's holes in it all over the place, and there still is holes in it, sadly, so you could always get in. As my dad used to joke regarding cemeteries, why put a wall around it? The people who are outside don't want to get in, and those who are in can't get out. Bit of a dad joke for you there. Anyway, as I say, it used to be a rite of passage to come in here. And one of the creepy stories that we used to tell regarding this cemetery was the story of the mad monks. Now, today there is a thing called creepypasta. For those of you who don't know what creepypasta is, it's not some new type of super noodles or anything like that. It's actual ghost stories that are related across the internet, mainly aimed through forums at children. They're the old urban legends of yesteryear. So if you want a bit of a scare, why not look up Slender Man and Laughing Jack, and they are the modern day equivalent to Bloody Mary and Red Clogs and all them kind of ghost stories that we used to tell way back in the day. But going back to the Mad Monks, it was said that the Mad Monks lived in the crematorium building, which is located in this cemetery. Now, unfortunately and sadly, there is a constant stream during the week of funerals taking place in the crematorium building. So I'm not going to be able to show you the actual building. Instead, out of respect, I'll just show a stock photograph of Wigan Crematorium to give you an idea of what the building looked like and show you a bit of ambience and set the scene. Now, you have to remember that although today the cemetery in the background there, it looks pretty well kept, and indeed it is. Wigan Council have done a fantastic job cleaning up this cemetery. Back in the 80s when I was a kid, that wasn't the case. You've got long grass everywhere, you've got graves unattended, you've got headstones leaning all over the place, and it really did look like something out of a Hammer House horror movie. And the crematorium building was no different, which I'll put a photo in for you now. Now, although this building looks pretty clean today, again, back in the 1980s, that wasn't the case. It was grimy, very dirty, and as we say here in Wigan, crummy. And that all fed into that gothic, creepy look that's there. Now, originally, this building was a mortuary chapel. There was 3 in total in this cemetery. The other 2 have long since vanished, along with the lodges at the cemetery gates. And this one has remained, and it was converted in 1953, I think it was, something like that, to become an actual crematorium to serve the people of Wigan who wished to be cremated after they'd passed away. So, apparently, and according to legend, the mad monks lived in the crematorium building. And their job was to patrol the cemetery grounds at night, and especially on Halloween night. And if the thought of cowled figures roaming these very paths that I'm walking doesn't scare you, the next bit of this legend definitely will. But to get to that part of the story, I need to get the other side of the crematorium building. So I'll make my way along this path, I'll cut the film here, and then we'll resume it on the other side, because I do believe that there's a funeral taking place at the crematorium, and out of respect, I don't want to be walking past with a camera. So join me when we get to the other side of the crematorium building. So what, Potters, we're now on the other side of the crematorium building, which you can just see in the background there. And we're now a respectful distance away from that funeral that's taking place, so we can carry on with a creepy little ghost story for this Halloween. Now, it was said that if you was caught by the mad monks in this cemetery after dark, and many children have claimed to have been chased by the mad monks through these pathways, but they always managed to get away somehow. But if you was caught, then you would be taken, frog-marched even, to a particular gravestone. And if the thought of cold, faceless figures roaming the cemetery grounds after dark doesn't scare you, the next part of this story definitely will. Because what supposedly would happen to you if you got brought to this gravestone will send chills down your spine, hot Potters. And I'm now approaching that very gravestone that the mad monks, allegedly, mind, used to bring you to. So I'll whip the camera around now, and we'll take a look at this gravestone, shall we? And here it is, hot Potters. This is the famous gravestone that legend had it. If you was caught in Wigan Cemetery after dark, especially on Halloween night, by the mad monks, you will be brought here, stripped naked and tied to, and then have your bare bottom spanked with sticks or branches. Someone had a very, very vivid imagination. Or a very sick one, really, depending on your perspective. Now, I think the reason this particular gravestone was chosen for the legend is it's the tallest one in this cemetery. And it's the grave of a former Mayor of Wigan, Henry Park, Justice of the Peace, 1882 to 1887, who died in November 1890, aged 63, buried here with his wife. And it's one of those big old-fashioned tombs. But as you can see, although they've cleaned this cemetery up somewhat, the back of it is a little bit neglected, so you can imagine why all this fed in to this legend that was supposedly told. One or two children did claim they'd been tied to this, but obviously they was telling porcupines. Anyway, I'll whip the camera around now and we'll carry on with this film. So folks, there you go. That was the story, or the legend, urban legend that is, of the mad monks of Wigan Cemetery. Now, as an adult, you obviously would question the logistics of this. Where would these monks sleep? Where would these monks eat? Where's the washing facilities, etc, etc. But as a kid, you buy into it hook, line and sinker. And the reason for that is, as I said earlier in this video, you've got to remember that this cemetery looked a lot different than it does today. But there's one area that I'm now making my way through that hasn't been touched really since the 1980s. And just for completion, I'll whip the camera around in a moment and I'll show you just how overgrown this cemetery used to be and why it was so easy to buy into this story. Now this part of Wigan Cemetery hasn't been cleaned up since about the 1980s. As you can see, it's very much overgrown, neglected and abandoned, which is a shame really. You would have thought over the decades they would have tidied this particular area of the cemetery up, as it's the last remaining part that hasn't been touched. But if you can imagine the old cemetery looking like this, hot potters, and you're coming in here at dark with a very vivid imagination that you have in single figures, it's no wonder we bought into the story of the mad monks, really. Anyway, I'll whip the camera around now and wrap this video up, I think. Okay folks, well, as I slowly make my way out of this abandoned and creepy part of Wigan Cemetery, sadly that brings us to the end of today's video, which I hope you've enjoyed. As I said, just a bit of a fun video today, as I've had to stick local due to being jalopulous and having to use Shank's pony. But I've enjoyed making this video and recalling part of my youth and the hijinks that we used to get up to. But I'm now going to slowly make my way out without going bum over pap. And really, all that's left for me to say is, until the next time, from myself, Mr. H, it is bye-bye for now.